Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Docker Captain Gossip. This series is about how we meet Docker captains around the world and talk about interesting things Docker related. Today, we have Shivay Lamba with us, who is a Docker captain, but apart from Docker captain, he is very much into AI and ML ecosystem with a lot of experience around the entire MLOps as well as the ecosystem. So today we both decided to team up and discuss the Docker MCP catalog so that we can understand as a beginner, if someone is as a beginner coming into the picture, understand how the things work and how they can use it to learn more about MCPs and everything. So the fun thing is like it's been a year that MCP came out, and um, so many MCP servers and so many MCP tools are right now in the market. And Shiv, I prepared quite a good 1 year recap, so I will show that. Uh, yep. So, sure, you want to go around about 1 year of MCP?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, Ritik, for doing this. I think it will be a very valuable set of live streams that you'll be doing. We'll not be sharing about your future ones, but yes, like today we are talking about MCP. So, as we can see that MCP was originally launched as part of Anthropic. The core idea was pretty straightforward, that we saw the great capabilities of LLMs, the way that they can be used for a bunch of different type of tasks, for text generation, for content generation. But that's actually one of the limitations of LLMs, if you understand that right, which is that they cannot really do anything apart from text generation. So if you wanted an LLM to be able to leverage them for being able to talk to your database, or maybe they have the capability for them to be able to run some kind of an API, they won't be able to directly do that. So MCP was a way for us to be able to accomplish all of that, which is something called as tool calling, which now most of the LLMs that are getting shipped today, they have very good support for tool call, which allows them to be able to go above and beyond and just not be text generation machine, right? So initially it was launched in November 2024 as like the initial spec. And of course there is a lot of really nice feedback by the community, and there is a lot of early adoption by some of the developer centric tools like Cursor. But it really shot up in popularity in February and March of this year in 2025, where there were more than 2,000 plus active MCP servers. And later on, most of the companies and products added support, including Cloud Desktop, ChatGPT, all of them added support for MCP. And, from there, we saw so many different MCP tools, MCP directories coming up. And then just a few days ago or a few weeks ago, MCP completed 1 year, and MCP was officially donated to the Linux Foundation by Anthropic as part of a growing list of AI and agentic AI tooling that is supported now as part of the Linux Foundation. So Linux Foundation, of course, we have the CNCF, but we also have the Linux Foundation AI group as well, which also has open source projects like PyTorch. So there are a bunch of different open source projects that you can find within the Linux Foundation, and now MCP as official specification is part of Linux Foundation. So we'll only see further adoption of MCP protocol as the entire spec grows and matures for the next few years.
And Shiva, if I may ask, what was your first interaction with MCP? Like, was it you were making something, or was it you were tool calling?
Yeah. So for me, it was very straightforward that, I used to work at Couchbase at that time. So we didn't have our own database server MCP. So I actually ended up building like an MCP server for our database. And it eventually led to getting adopted. And, at this point in time, there are like a lot of customers who are actually using that MCP server. So the main goal was to like build an early scale prototype, because Cloudflare at that point in time was one of the first companies that launched support for being able to run remote MCP servers. So what that means is that, of course, when you are having an MCP server, you want it to host somewhere. Now, generally, you will need to have like a dedicated backend, some kind of a server where you will host it and you'll expose it. But at that point in time, like by January of 2025, so just 1.5 months in, Cloudflare, they were one of the first companies to have the capability where you can basically host the MCP server code on Cloudflare and get a remote HTTP remote MCP server URL, and now you can host it anywhere. So you just provide the URL and you can connect to the MCP server. So they were one of the first ones that provided it. So I ended up building a demonstration of using the Couchbase database and the capability for you to interact in natural language with your database. And if you want to run some operations with your database, you can do that very easily. And then eventually, I also added the PR for the official Docker catalog, which we'll talk about today for Couchbase. So yeah, I mean, I was very early adopter of MCP and building my own custom MCP server for our database, and then hosting it with the remote MCP server support for Cloudflare. So that was my first interaction.
And if someone wants to go and make their MCP, so what are the steps? Like there is tools, there is the server.
Yeah.
So like
So it's relatively straightforward at this point in time. You can basically, so there are two ways. One is there is the official MCP SDK support that you provide on Anthropic, and they initially launched with support for TypeScript and Python, but today they have SDKs in multiple languages like Golang, Java, Python, TypeScript, Ruby. So you can use any of their supported SDK languages and create your own MCP server with that. But there also are there are open source projects that allow you to make it very easy. For example, in Python, there's something called as fast MCP. So it provides a layer of abstraction on top of the core Python SDK for that is provided by Anthropic, and it's very simple. You just have a few functions that you have to define, a few characteristics that you have to fill with when you're using fast MCP, and within a matter of a few minutes, you can basically create your own MCP server from scratch. So there are a lot of dedicated tooling. And now, for example, if you're using something like Cursor, or perhaps you're using Warp, these are AI assisted agentic tools that you can use to assist with your development process. You just define that, hey, this is my tool. I want to create an MCP server from it. And by just with a few simple prompts, you can create an entire MCP server by just generating the code from these AI tools. So it's very simple today to create an MCP server.
and it should be simpler to consume an MCP server where
Exactly. So, initially we only had support for being able to interact with MCP servers with Claude Desktop. But today, if you look at most of the popular AI tools like Claude Code, or you talk about Gemini CLI, Cursor, VS Code, Gordon by Docker, all of them have support for being able to add MCP support. So you just basically add your MCP server or your MCP server configuration, and voila, like in just a couple of clicks, now your AI agents have access to these MCP servers.
awesome. And so Docker launched something related to MCP last year, right?
Yes.
So
So. hmm.
what does it do exactly? We can go into the demo in a bit, but
Yeah, maybe it will be good to also show it. So, one of the core aspects of MCP is security, and that's actually one of the things that has probably prevented large scale adoption, because a lot of companies are particularly scared with some of the vulnerabilities that you get with MCP. And as a protocol, so think of it in this way, right? Traditionally, what did we always do? We always basically did API calls. So if you are trying to make an API call and you are exposing your secrets, environment variables, or you don't know what that API actually does, or you're trying to run some untrusted code, those are some massive security vulnerabilities, right? And these are security vulnerabilities which are not new. These have always existed since the existence of microservices based architecture, or if you're trying to run some untrusted code. So when MCP was launched in November last year, those were some of the security concerns, because the idea of the idea of basically running an MCP server means that you have some commands that you will run, and then you have some code that you don't know who has written that. So, and you're running it in your host machine. So what if the code that you're running, it interacts with your host machine, and it it causes or it adds some vulnerabilities in your entire host machine, right? And it basically takes over. You never know. And other thing is that when you're defining an MCP configuration, when you want to run an MCP server inside of, like, let's say a VS Code or a cursor, you also might have some environment variables. So for example, if you're connecting to a database, you'll have your database connection string, your username, password to connect to the database. Or if you're connecting to an MCP server with GitHub, which we'll see today, you have your personal access token. So there you're exposing all of these environment variables. Now, if you're doing it directly, if you're using it with, like, let's say a Cloud Code or a Cursor, and you are probably trying to host your MCP server somewhere online, then you're also at the risk of exposing all these environment variables. So, there is a lot of inherent risk when trying to run MCP servers. And the way that we saw was that these are some massive security vulnerabilities. And of course, over time, MCP spec itself has added authentication, like built-in authentication that you can do with MCP today. But of course, there are still these risks of running untrustworthy code and also exposing environment variables. So basically, Docker thought of a way that, hey, like, these are some massive problems. So how do we solve them? So they basically added the support for MCP toolkit. And the entire idea is that these are, and you can see, like, there are more than 312 verified MCP toolkits that you can see, including the one from Couchbase that you see there, which is the PR. Actually, I created the PR for this. And the idea is that we can run these MCP servers in containerized environments. So idea is that rather than running the MCP server directly on your host machine, you basically containerize the entire MCP server. And when you run it with Docker, you're basically running the MCP server in a Docker container, and you're running it in a containerized environment, which basically adds security. And in addition, if you just probably go to one of these MCP servers, maybe you can click on GitHub, because we'll probably try out GitHub today. You can see when you click on configuration here, you can basically add your own secrets. So in this case, for example, with GitHub MCP server, you would get access to a bunch of different tools. So you can go to the tools tab, and you'll be able to see that these are the list of all the available tools that you get with this MCP server. So the ability to get issues, list branches, be able to actually make some commits as well. So all of these are the different tools that you give access to your LLM or to your agent, and they can make use of these tools and execute things on GitHub, which normally they would not be able to. So now, if you were directly running this MCP server with Cloud Code, with Cursor, you would have to give access to this environment variables, which you can actually set and in the configuration section, and you get full security, full without having to worry at all with respect to with all of this tooling. So basically, the idea is that with the Docker MCP support, you get two things. One is the capability to actually execute the MCP server code directly inside of the Docker
Environment.
containers, and you also get the capability to add your configurations, so the environment variables, environment secrets directly inside of Docker. So this makes it a lot more secure to be able to execute this code. And now, once, for example, you have set up an MCP server, you can essentially connect it with any of your traditional clients. So MCP clients, and MC client could be VS Code, it could be Cloud Desktop, it could be Cursor, or it could be Cloud Code. Wherever you want to basically connect and use and run the MCP servers, you can very easily connect it. So it's a very easy way and a secure way to run secure and verifiable MCP service, because right now today you have to create a PR on the official MCP catalog on GitHub. So it's an open source repository, and that's where they basically, and what the good thing is that every single day, or maybe I'm not sure if it's every single day or not, but Docker is like, once you launch a PR or you create a PR on the main Docker MCP toolkit GitHub, they are actually rebuilding these images every
On their
single
own.
day, or maybe like with every single release. So your company doesn't have to actually worry. Now, traditionally, or I mean, technically, you could host your own MCP server, and you can also actually create a Docker Hub repository for that and maintain it yourself. But Docker is ready to actually maintain it for you. You don't have to push new upstream changes when you're actually making any changes in your GitHub repository locally. Because the way that it happens is that you can so when you're basically creating a PR to the Docker MCP toolkit repository, you have to share the base GitHub repository where your MCP server exists, right? Where the source code of the MCP server exists. So whenever you're making changes in your GitHub repository, Docker internally has pipelines that automatically capture that you have made some changes, and the pipelines rebuild the official MCP image on Docker and they publish it. So rather than you having to push it, having to worry about all of that, Docker actually handles all of that for you. So that's like a great thing about the Docker MCP toolkit. These are all the verifiable. But the good thing is that what if you're basically building some source code of your own and you don't want to publish it to the official MCP registry on Docker Hub? You can use the CLI. So there, when you're using Docker CLI commands, there is also the Docker Catalog CLI commands that you can use, and you can actually publish your MCP server on this catalog that you see. Of course, it is not going to be visible to anyone outside of your local Docker desktop. But later on, if you have tested it, you can create a PR, you can raise a PR on the official GitHub repository. Maybe it might be worthwhile, Ritik, to show the official GitHub repository as well. So you can contribute and it will show you. So this is the official MCP registry, and here you can basically fork it and create a PR. So you can already see that there are a lot of ones which are trying to add like Rudderstack, Data Likers, Magic Lane, MCP server. So these are all of the ones that have been raised, and now of course Docker maintainers and the Docker folks will create it. And you can see that if you go to the file changes, you can see it's basically a simple YAML configuration where you say that okay, like what that MCP image would look like, and here you have to basically provide the source code of that particular. So here you can see that this is the GitHub repository of the MCP server. So this is the MCP server code, and then Docker, once they accept this PR, they will create an internal pipeline that connects to that GitHub repository, syncs with that, and it automatically helps us to create a containerized version of this MCP server and publish it with Docker.
Yep. And to summarize, like the architecture of MCP server for beginners, so there is a server over here, and it calls a lot of tools, which it has the capacity of like REST repositories and all those things. And then there is a client like your VS Code or something, or your cloud desktop, which calls the server, right?
Yeah,
And this you can define whatever this tools can be. Like for example, it can be your calling the repository, like for in case of GitHub, writing to a repository, deleting a repository, something like that, right?
yeah, exactly.
Got it. So next, I think we can.
Maybe if you want to show the architecture, you can just Google MCP architecture.
Yeah,
There's a really nice diagram as well on the official Anthropic website as well.
yeah, let's do that.
This for folks who might be new to MCP. So yeah,
Yes.
that's what you basically drew. That you have bunch of MCP clients, and the clients will be connected to the MCP server, and each and every MCP server will have access to one or more than one MCP tools. And depending on what the user's query is, we are automatically able to use the LLM. And based on the description of the tools, the LLM is automatically able to relate that okay, based on this user's query, this is the specific MCP tool that is the most appropriate one. So it will invoke that MCP tool, and their MCP tool definition, it might be a function, simple function, it might be a more complex function. So we execute that function, we get the response back, and the MCP server sends that response back to the LLM, and then the LLM uses that response to either generate the response back to the user, or it might use it for something else. Maybe it's like a part of the process of running an AI agent,
Mm,
and it uses the response to do some other action based on whatever you have defined as part of your agent.
yeah, call whatever tools you have and use them to carry out a function. So
Exactly.
yeah.
And of course, I mean, we could dive deeper into the MCP specification, and then the transport layer, and what is the process through which the data is actually sent, like the fetching of the data, all of that. But I think like that's probably for another conversation. But we can dive deeper into like some hands-on right now with MCP Toolkit.
Yeah. So one of the like as you told, one of the easiest way is that you can also create your MCP servers.
Yeah.
So I've done a couple of them, a simple file server with MCP, and it's very simple. We can go into that later on after we
Mhm.
apply with the Docker MCP toolkit. But
Yeah.
first things first, I will go and create a path and add it to the configuration.
So maybe Ritik, you want to go through like what you're trying to do today?
Yep, just
So we
done.
are going to use the GitHub MCP server and leverage that to automatically understand an issue in your GitHub repository and l- basically provide that access to a cursor or maybe some kind of VS Code and allow the AI agent to be able to understand the content of a GitHub issue with the help of the MCP server and then resolve or maybe help us to fix the issue that we find in that issue, right?
So yes, as Shiva told, we have this repository called Feed Poster. It is an automation engine to look into RSS feed and post them on Twitter. And me and Shiva today met and created an issue where we want to add more unit tests and improve logging. And this repository is cloned locally for us. And to interact with this, we will need the GitHub MCP server.
Yeah, maybe what we can do is, Ritik, you can show this to everyone that once you have cloned it, if you're trying to use an AI tool, you want to say that, hey, help me implement the solution for issue number 18. What actually happens?
Sure, we can
Now,
use
one thing to
cloud
keep in mind is that depending on what LLM you might use, these days a lot of LLMs are being shipped with web search
websites.
built in. So they already have like tool support for doing web search. So this may or may not work. But imagine that if you had one of the older LLMs, I think you're not sharing the screen right now.
No, I'm just opening
Yeah.
Claude.
Maybe Claude might not be the best idea because it's actually pretty good, but we can try. We can try to
Do you
see.
want to enable web search?
We can disable web search actually. That's
Okay,
better.
fine. So let's. Can you fix the issue here? Sounds good. Or do you want
Yeah.
to make the prompt better?
And maybe what we can try to do is that actually do this in VS Code where where your code is, because that will we can also try here, but this is fine. We can we
Let's
can
try
run
this.
this, but we can also try this in the GitHub repository that you have cloned locally with VS Code.
Yeah. Sure. Let's try here, and then we can
Yeah.
go over here.
So what do you expect the LLM to say is that, hey, I don't have
Okay,
access to this
access.
GitHub repository. But as I mentioned that these days a lot of LLMs they have, yeah, so you can see it's trying to access, it's just failing. It does not have access to the capability to directly fetch the GitHub issue. So now imagine that you have to go all the way, copy paste all of the issue description. What if you had a way where the LLM had the capability to get access to this issue? And that's where the GitHub MCP server comes in, right? So we can try the same thing with VS Code as well when you launch the code.
Yeah. One other thing is like, for example, even if we enable web search, uh, the problem is like it will go read through it and can provide some solutions, but when we have a way to interact, then it makes it easier, right?
Exactly. See, again, it failed to fetch.
So
So
that's
you can clearly see what are the issues. It's not the most intuitive when it comes. So it has to go through a lot of hurdles, and you can already see that it's trying its way, but it's failing, right? It's going to consume a lot of time, it's going to consume a lot of tokens as well, and you'll fare much better when you're using MCP server from GitHub. because it has dedicated tools need that you need to basically incorporate. So the web search might actually work, but imagine it has to go through so many hurdles, so many hidden trial methods to do specifically the task that you want to do, for which you have dedicated tools already there. So it's all just that the LLM has to find, okay, I have the list of 40 different tools. What is that specific tool that I need to use? And it just selects that tool and implements it. So all this effort that you're seeing right now, Claude having to put in, the matter of probably taking 5-10 minutes, you could potentially do it in a matter of just a minute, because it has access to the right tool, right? And of course, what matters when you're trying to build Gen AI applications is speed and the capability to use as less tokens as possible and less time to actually think through things. And with this particular setup, you always have a risk of something not working correctly, because the risk of errors coming up are a lot higher when the LLM does not have access to the right kind of tools. So it has greater risk of hallucinating as well. Whereas with MCPs, the risk of hallucinating is a lot less.
And it is also that we don't want it to be read only, right? We want to write, create, modify,
Exactly.
and all those things. And all those things right now isn't possible with those. But when it comes to
Hmm.
MCP, as you can see, there are tools to delete the files, create repositories, branches, issues, and all those things, which is more powerful than just interacting with a chatbot or an LLM to understand what is happening.
Exactly.
So, so it's trying. So let's go to VS Code. And Shiva, tell me, what should I do over here?
Yep. So what you got to do is that before this, let's actually set up our MCP server for GitHub. So first thing first, you have to go to the configuration, add your personal access token. So click on the authentication method as personal access token and paste your personal access token over here.
Yeah, it's done.
You already done?
Yep.
Perfect. So now click on add MCP server.
And
So
this
this
will
will be
add the
added.
MCP server to
Yeah.
our local.
Yes, exactly. So you can click on that. Perfect. Go back. Now, if you go on clients, so you already have there, you can basically set this up inside of MCP. There should be a option for VS Code. Maybe if you scroll down, is there one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can connect with it. So what this basically does is that, so what is going on under the hood is that as soon as you connect with VS Code, uh, you can basically find a script for MCP inside of your VS Code, and it automatically adds this Docker. So if you go to your MCP list of MCP servers within VS Code, the
Need to
option to
restart
bring like the
this.
menu. I think it's what is the command? Maybe control. You're using a Mac, so it will be Command Shift and P, I guess, which shows you all of the, yeah.
Uh,
So here, if you just type MCP,
no, it's not. Uh, it's a build task.
no, no, no. So maybe just uh,
I
how do you
think
bring? Because I use cursor. So cursor has a different
I think
UI.
we need
Let
to
me.
restart this, right?
Yeah, I mean you can restart as well. That's fine.
Yeah.
Ideally, you don't need to restart, but yeah. What is that command? Let me see.
Yeah, the command
Just
line.
Command P.
Okay.
Yeah, command palette. So just type MCP. So you can see browse MCP servers. Yeah, you can enable it. Perfect. And if you just type MCP,
Docker.
no, we have already added that. Maybe not the MCP. We don't want to use the MCP extensions. We already have the one
Oh,
that's
yeah, it's here.
linked. Yeah, perfect. So you can see here that this one is there. But no, no, we want to see like what are the list of MCP servers that are active right now. So maybe do a command P again. Go to the command palette. Type MCP again. Uh, so click on show installed servers. MCP show
Yeah,
installed servers.
it's a show install service over here, right?
Okay, and then click on the settings that we have. So you can click on Start Server. So what this will do is that it will enable the list of the GitHub MCP server, and I guess you also have another one, right? So you have a couple of them. So you can see that it read the GitHub personal access token. Uh, Actually, because I can see the internal webcams, I cannot see the official uh,
Ah,
outputs that you're
okay.
seeing. Maybe can you
Yeah,
shift the UI? Oh, perfect.
now
Yeah.
better.
So now you can see that it discovered 69 different tools. So because you have two different MCP servers, so now it has access to both of these servers. So because with MCP Docker, it's basically creating a bridge, right?
Mm,
So with Docker MCP, you're running the MCP servers in the containerized environments with Docker. So you're giving it access to two different MCP servers. One is GitHub, and I think you had another one which is Playwright.
yeah.
So with Docker GitHub MCP server, you have 40 tools and then 29 coming from Playwright. So it
Mm,
now has access to all these 69 different tools. So when now you will use the agent mode within your VS Code agent, so with like let's say with Copilot, it will have access to these MCP servers with GitHub and with Playwright. And when you ask it a question like, "Hey, I have this issue number 18, can you help me to actually run it?" It will automatically identify which particular tool to call and do it. So we can try it out in live in action.
Yes, but
Maybe you
let's
can
first see
open up.
where's the MCP server running. Is it in a container?
Yes, it's in a container. So if you go to your Docker desktop, if you see containers, you should potentially see the so it will be in execution, right? So basically the idea would be, yeah, you can see here. So you have MCP Playwright and the
Yeah,
GitHub MCP server. So that's your container.
that's the
But
image.
ideally, it should show up. So maybe like once you start to execute it,
Ah,
it might show at that time.
yeah, sure. And
Because the main goal here is that it will not run continuously. It will so as soon as you run the MCP server, like when you're like let's say the
when the
AI
tool
agent
calling
is
is
actually
happening.
calling it, it's spinning up the container and it's executing the tool call, and then it basically closes. You don't have to run it all the time.
Oh, then that's awesome because you're not wasting your resources
Exactly, exactly.
whenever the tool calling is happening.
Yeah,
Yeah. So let's talk with our MCP server. So should I start Copilot?
yeah. You can open up the Copilot window. So it should be Command B, I guess. No.
I think first of all we need to open the
Oh
repo.
yeah, the GitHub repository, the local repository code.
So yeah,
Perfect. Now, yeah, in the agent mode, let's use the agent mode right now.
yeah.
Select agent mode. Perfect. And we can ask it a question like, hey, can you help me solve the issue number 18? Yeah, perfect.
Was it 18 or 17?
So now you can see there it's 18. So it says optimizing tool selection. So it automatically is connected to your Docker MCP locally, and it's trying to find what is the most appropriate tool that it should use. So here you can see that it's using the MCP Docker, and it will most likely get the issue details by using the get issue details. And now it has automatically understood that it needs to add unit tests and improve logging. So you can definitely see how quick it was. Maybe try to expand that ran get issue details MCP server, Ritik,
Yeah.
that dialog box. So here you can see that this is the output. No, no, actually scroll a bit up. So you can see that this was the input. It ran. No, no, yeah. So
Oh,
it
this.
was
Yeah.
the get method, issue number 18, repo was feed poster, and owner was Ritik because you added the PAT details, like the personal access token, and it was able to fetch the details about that particular issue, and it automatically found that, okay, you have to add your um, you need to basically add the unit tests, right, and
Yeah.
improve the logging, and it was way faster as compared to what you saw with Claude desktop app, where it was trying out different things, and now you can see that it's basically up and running. So it basically that simple. It identifies that okay, this is the set of MCP servers that it has access to, what MCP server it has to use, what is the appropriate tool that it has to use depending on what the user has asked, and it automatically starts executing that tool call, gets a response, and then the agent is up and running. So it makes it that simple to leverage, and you
Uh,
can already see that the
yeah,
agent is
it's doing the
now
logging.
making the changes
Yeah,
as
adding logs
necessary.
and all.
I mean, the rest of the thing is basic code generation by the
Yeah,
agent, but again, it makes it super simple and a much more deterministic way to use stuff and do things which you would have to manually write scripts for doing all of that. You can just use these MCP tools.
and the tool, and now for example, if we ask it to, okay, so it wants us to run this command, so testing happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can just skip it because it just wants to test it. But let's see if there is a dedicated tool to actually create a PR.
I think there is, because if we see over here,
Is there one?
yeah, it
Create
will
pull
request.
request. So we can just ask it that hey, now please go ahead and create a pull request for me.
Sure, let it complete. Just the last task is being done. So yeah, this is quite seamless in comparison to, in a way, where we were just trying to guesswork. But
Exactly.
now this tool will just start. The server will only start when the tool is running, so we don't need to waste resources. And when we are utilizing the resources, it is very efficient because we are just
Yeah.
targeting things.
Maybe what you can do, Ritik, here, you can open the Docker desktop and VS Code side by side, just to
Sure.
show, because the point is that when you create the container, it is only created for a very short period of time. And actually, I might be wrong, but because this is running internally, it might not even actually show up. But you can trust the system that it's actually running the MCP or it's invoking the tool call in a containerized environment. Because I was having interaction with one of the Docker engineers,
Hmm.
and they mentioned that they have hidden it, so technically you could show it in action, but that might be the case. But
Yeah.
rest be assured that it's not running in your core desktop, but we can just experiment and see, because I've actually not tested this myself. But we can go to container, like we can now go ahead and ask it to create a PR and see if it creates momentarily. But the idea is that it does.
Yeah, it is
But
asking us to give it permission to add a comment. So
yeah,
yeah, let's
let's do that.
and
See,
yeah.
it created all of these containers, and very soon, once it does all of that to do it, they'll all automatically get destroyed.
So this is very
So
efficient in comparison to keeping something running always.
exactly.
Like, for example, I created a file system MCP and I had to keep it running always.
Yeah.
And if you want to check the GitHub, I think it added a comment over here. Uh,
Or
yeah,
maybe it will, right?
it will.
I think it's still running.
Oh, it's still running. And now I think as the work is done, they all will be deleted.
You can take a look at the logs, maybe, because sometimes, of course, it's not that MCP is foolproof.
Mhm.
Sometimes it might, well, because it's generating a rather large summary for the issue. So that could be the reason it's taking a bit of time.
Yeah, let's wait.
Yeah. Although the input has been created, so that's interesting. But again, that's also to show that MCP itself is not 100% foolproof. Like, there can be sometimes hallucinations taking place. So you need to be very careful with how you prompt as well.
Mm. So I think it's still processing. So we can wait or do something else, like ask it
Yeah,
to.
I mean, normally it does not take this much time. Maybe we can, um,
Yeah, like
we can pause it and just ask it to create a PR. Like, let's try that out.
Yeah.
So for that, you'll have to click on that pause icon at the lower right corner, and then just run this. And in the meantime, while it's doing this, you can, yeah, you can take a look at it. Showed a cancelled, and was it because we cancelled it, or did it throw an error?
Uh, let's see. I think so. It's not using
Oh,
the
okay.
uh,
Because I mean, yeah. So you know, it's fine. We can see like there are a couple of ways. It could,
like
because
which is the
it's,
most efficient way.
yeah,
Currently, the most efficient way is to just
do it
talk with
locally.
the CLI, but sometimes it is like pulling and then using the tools. So whatever
Exactly.
it is. So do you want to see if we can create a repository?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Create a repository. Uh, live stream.
It might again. So here's the thing, right? That okay. So create a GitHub repository. Perfect. MCP server. But this is great that it was able to find that this is the GitHub repository,
Hmm.
and it used the MCP server tool. But one thing to keep in mind is that ultimately, like if you're using something like a VS Code, GitHub Copilot, there's always a case where it might have the option to do things with the MCP, or because it has access to your local environment, it might just use like the local CLI because it can do both.
Yeah, whichever
It
is
can run
more
local
efficient.
commands, and
Yeah,
so that's something to note.
yeah. Like for example, you can go and create a folder with the CLI, or you can go create a folder in cloud, download it. It's the same
Exactly.
thing, but whatever is more efficient works. So let's see what's happening over here. Things are running, but let's see. This is also processing. We can just go and check and get up if it's happened or not.
Yep.
So it might take a bit of time, but mm, but we can wait and talk about something else. And if it happens in the background, that's good enough. So one question again I had for you is like there are option to, like for you hosted that Couchbase MCP server on Cloudflare. So when does it make sense to use a local MCP server, and when does it makes it better to host it? So what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, depends on what your end use case is. For example, if you're trying to get a remote MCP server, it makes sense to use that as well. Sorry. Yeah. So if you're having like a remote MCP server, anyone can just basically connect with it and add the MCP, like the remote MCP server URL, and they can directly connect with it. So it makes the setup process or the ability to use an MCP server very, very easily. Now if you're like wanting to manually set it up with your specific variables, something you want to test locally, then you might want to use like local MCP server deployment. So ultimately it depends, because there are so many different MCP registries as well where you can host the official MCP server, but then you require to connect to that MCP registry, then download that MCP server locally and then execute it. Whereas with the remote MCP server, because that's one of the protocols, which is the remote HTTP. So with the remote HTTP protocol, you can basically connect with MCP servers by just remotely, as you said. So Cloudflare was one of the first companies that had the support. I mean, there are a few other companies as well that allow support for hosting remote HTTP based on the remote HTTP protocol. So it depends on you, like which particular protocol you want to choose, the way that you have configured your MCP server, and then you can use remote MCP servers as well.
And Utkarsh had a question. So how MCP and AI agents are related?
See, so the point is that how they're related, right? So that's a good question. So see, AI agents, what are AI agents? AI agents are nothing but just LLMs are with the ability to do tool call, with the capability to like do, so as I mentioned, like do tool calls with with LLMs, and then having a memory, right? So an AI agent can basically leverage the MCP for being able to run tasks. So, for example, it wants to execute some tool, then you can have the LLM talk or interact with the MCP server and execute that particular task, or use that particular tool. So, most of the agent frameworks today have native MCP support. So that's something to keep in mind. So most of your traditional MCP servers, or most of your traditional agent frameworks like Agno, or maybe Mastra, or even LangChain, LangGraph, they have all added support for MCP. So that means that when your agent is executing any kind of task, in that case, the agent can automatically, or the LLM that is being used in that agent framework can automatically get access to the MCP service and use them to do some kind of task. So that's the main idea.
Yeah, makes sense. And and if someone wants to build AI agents, so what are the popular frameworks for that? Have you been playing with AI agents recently?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I was asking, so if someone wants to build AI agents, what are the popular frameworks that you have been seeing recently?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the most prominent ones are definitely LangGraph and LangChain. Like these are frameworks, but then a lot of people are also actually using Agno. If you're from the TypeScript community, you can also use Mastra, but Agno is there. Then Crew AI is another one, and then you have LangGraph. So these are the ones that are the most popular, and all of them you'll see like have built-in support for being able to like run and host MCP servers. And when you're defining the agent and you're running the agentic workflows, they will have automatic access to MCP.
Got it. And sounds good. And apart from that, the advantage of having the MCP catalog is like you have a trusted, like it's just like Docker verified images, right? But for MCP,
Exactly.
so
Hmm.
which helps you to trust the images, and if you want to contribute to that, you can do that and trust them and use it, which makes the whole
Exactly.
process seamless.
And it's not just, honestly, not just about the capability to run trusted code, but you're also running it inside of an actual container, right? You're basically running it inside of a container, and you run trusted code in the container. Like, even if there was some issue, you're still, if you're using Docker catalog, right? You can run it in a secure manner because you're running it inside of a container, and rather than your host machine. And then I mentioned that for dealing with environment variables, environment secrets, all of that can also be taken care of. Now, the ability for future iterations of MCP toolkit would be that you could have your own private MCP toolkit in your organization. So you don't need to have like a public MCP server. Maybe, in an organization, you're using an MCP server that wants to be privately hosted. That's something that they're adding support for in the future. And the ability to also limit like what kind of users can actually access specific tools, because that's actually one of the things related to OAuth 2.1 support that we're adding for MCPs. So which basically says that you can restrict the kind of usage on the MCP server based on the roles and permissions of specific users in your organization, because sometimes you might not want each and every user in your organization to access all of the different tools, right? You might want to limit them or add specific conditions, that okay, users with these specific roles, they can only access like these specific MCP tools. So we are seeing all of that also being added to make MCPs more secure. And a lot of companies today are like working on MCP security with respect to all of this RBAC support and OAuth 2.1, which is now added officially to the spec.
Awesome. So Utkarsh had a follow-up question. So it was, so AI agents is to execute a bunch of tasks in sync, and MCPs for some focused task.
See, I mean, that's one way to put it, but if you look at exactly what's happening. So you saw with VS Code, right? So that's an agent. So that's a coding agent. So the coding agent, we gave it a task that helped me find this GitHub issue and help write the code based on the description of the issue. Now, the cursor agent or this VS Code agent, it did not have access directly have access to the GitHub repository. So what it did was that it said, okay, I have access to the GitHub MCP server, and I will use that GitHub MCP server. I already know the user's query. I will identify what is the most appropriate tool that I can call from the GitHub MCP server, and it passes the execution to the GitHub MCP server so that it can make the tool call. And in this case, the tool call is, okay, find me the GitHub issue description. So in that case, it knows, okay, it's the issue number 18, and it's from this GitHub repository, from this is the username of that GitHub repository, right? So it passes the execution to the MCP tool call. The tool call fetches the details of that particular issue, gives it back to the agent, and now the agent has access to the entire tool description, or to the issue description, and
Yeah,
then it starts working on. So the next tool that call it the next tool it will call is like the coding agent, right? It will basically pass access to the coding agent. Now the coding agent will make changes in the files based on what happened. So MCP is nothing but just an external tool call that you can do with, and you're doing that with the help of MCP. So MCP is the protocol, and you can get access to external tools with the help of this GitHub MCP server. Yeah, I mean, so that's the core idea.
yeah.
So
Basically, if you have an agent running locally and you ask them to clone a repo, so it will go and clone a public repo easily. But if you
exactly,
want to ask them to clone a private repo, it will try to do XYZ things, try to do that. But if it has the connection to the MCP server, it will call the MCP server, use the tools, and do it more seamlessly.
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, so this was very helpful, like for someone who's just getting started with MCP, going around what is the simple correlation to normal things which we are using, and how MCP is related and helpful in normal world with so many different type of MCP servers right now. Like you can use and play with AWS. Like if you want to create a EKS cluster or something, if you want to do so many things are there. Basically, the pricing and all those things. So you have a n number of options to interact with the applications through your clients, and the catalog and the ecosystem is always growing. So next time we will try to bring in something more interesting and related to MCP. But thank you, Shivai, for taking out the time and discussing MCP. You have been doing this since the start and sharing about how MCP is shaping the moving future, and how things like Docker MCP toolkit come to the picture, where you can run secure MCP on your local machine, and trusted code is quite helpful.
Absolutely. And I mean, the point is that there's so much scope to improve. You can, if you are having your own company's MCP servers, you should definitely add it to the catalog. One thing that we didn't specifically talk today about was, I mean, we discussed it, but we didn't do in person, was how you can add your own MCP servers to the toolkit. So maybe, Ritik, as last thing, you can do one thing. You can go to the Docker docs. So you can just go to Google and search for Docker MCP toolkit
Like,
docs.
okay, not the toolkit docs, right?
I mean, you can actually find it here as well, so that's fine. So here you can see, if you are contributing to Docker MCP registry, you can create a pull request, and you can also add your entry locally. So that's how you do it with the task wizard. So basically, what's happening here is that when you want to add your own you want to add your own MCP server, just follow these instructions by using this task command, and what will happen is that you would be able to see your MCP server in the toolkit just locally for you, and not for anyone else.
And then
So
once you test it and everything, you can continue
exactly, you
to
can
this
raise a PR.
repository.
Exactly.
Yeah, a seamless way to do that. I
So
will
you can
post.
probably share this link with
Yeah,
everyone once this live stream is over, or in the
so
comment section right now.
I will do it in the comment. And
And it's honestly a fun process. Like this way, you can test out your MCP server. Maybe if you want to share it with your colleagues, you can do that as well. If you don't want to necessarily like publish it for everyone, so this way you
yeah,
can run these locally and
like
get
for
access to everything.
example, like so many MCP servers are there. Like this is an MCP server which is right now in pull request, which helps you to generate images and videos using Gemini Veo and
Yeah,
image.
if you want to like show a example of one of the dedicated ones it's already merged, you can go to the MCP registry code, and it should be under servers. Yeah, exactly. I can probably talk about the one from Couchbase. So you can search for, yeah, go there, click on server.yaml. So in this case, you can see that there's the name, the image is officially the MCP slash Couchbase. The source is there in the ecosystem. So that's the official GitHub repository of the MCP server. And then you can see what are the set of environment variables that you need to set when you are running this MCP server. So all of that will be done correctly, and you'll be able to secure your all of your environment variables and secrets.
Yeah, so basically an API to interact with your application, not just the endpoints.
Exactly.
So yeah, sure. So so thank you so much, Shiva, for taking out the time and being here.
Yeah, it was lovely, Ritik, and I'm sure that a lot of people will find this very valuable. And looking forward to the rest of the entire series of your other Docker
Captain Boss.
Captain walk. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining the stream.